Now I confess, I really like Type Moon. I'm a huge fan of Fate Stay Night and many of the company's other entries into the Nasuverse. But while Type Moon has given us many interesting stories with great characters and unique world building, even I have to admit that outside of anime, the company is absolutely horrible at releasing all their other media overseas. The company's track record with releasing their video games and manga overseas is spotty at best. But no medium gets it worse than Type Moon's visual novels, which, despite serving as the lifeblood to many of their most popular stories such as Tsukihime and Fate Stay Night, not a single one has ever been legally released or translated overseas, at least until now. Because finally, after years of fans nagging them to do so, Type Moon has teamed up with Aniplex to have their remaster of Witch on the Holy Night release overseas to Western audiences. And with me being such a big fan of Type Moon's work, there was no way I wouldn't be checking out Witch on the Holy Night. Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to Denotaz Media, and if you're a fan of anime, manga, and other nerdy forms of entertainment, then you're in luck because I consistently cover all those topics here on my channel. So make sure you subscribe to get more videos regarding Type Moon content and more here on Denotaz Media. Also, spoiler warning, for those who have not read Witch on the Holy Night yet and don't want to be spoiled on the game story, click off now and then return once you've read it. It's currently available on the PS4 and the Nintendo Switch, so you can read it and come back once you're done. So without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on Witch on the Holy Night. So Witch on the Holy Night, otherwise known as Mahoyo, is the remaster of a 2012 visual novel published by Type Moon. It follows a young mage named Aoko Awazaki who lives in a large mansion owned by her roommate Alice Kuonji that's located on top of a hill in the town of Misaki. The two girls practiced magecraft in secret until one day, an odd young man raised in the mountains named Sojiro Shizuki stumbles upon them using their powers to fight off a dangerous threat. Although Aoko attempts to silence Sojiro at first, due to unexpected circumstances, the two end up becoming allies instead, which as a result leads to Sojiro living with Alice and Aoko in their mansion until they can figure out what to do with him. Let's start off by talking about Witch on the Holy Night's presentation. Witch on the Holy Night's presentation as a visual novel is pretty decent. Unlike some visual novels which include choices that allow you to either progress or fail within the story like a video game, Witch on the Holy Night decides to go for just a pure linear story with chapter times like a good old-fashioned book. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with this form of presentation, that doesn't mean it couldn't have used some additional improvements. For example, I think Witch on the Holy Night is in desperate need of an audio narrator and a dub, especially since one of the major drawbacks of the visual novel is its length. I'm just gonna tell you guys straight up, do not try to binge play Witch on the Holy Night, because despite having no alternative routes or game mechanics, this visual novel is still a whopping 20 hours long, thanks mostly due to Kinokunasu's very descriptive text. But while this in itself doesn't necessarily take away from the story's quality, it does make it a bit challenging to get through the novel, especially since the way it's formatted makes it very difficult to multitask. For example, part of the reason I was able to enjoy Tsukihime so much was due to the narration in Otaku Daikun's fantastic Tsukihime recap videos, which if you haven't seen, I'll link in the description of this video so you can check it out. But nevertheless, because I had the ability to listen to the story, it allowed me to get through it much faster, and also allowed me to enjoy it while I was doing other daily activities. Then, while Witch on the Holy Night may not have had any audio narration for its descriptive text, the visual novel does feature voiceover for its characters' dialogue, and on that note, I think it was a huge missed opportunity for Witch on the Holy Night not to have a dub. This is especially the case when you think of it from a business perspective, because as much as sub-elitists may deny it, a huge percent of fans actually consume Japanese anime and video games through the dubs. Now, don't get me wrong, the Japanese actors were amazing in their roles, which is something I'll address later on in this video. But the truth is, dubs make things way more accessible for all different types of fans, including those in the disability community. And not only do dubs make the content more accessible to a larger audience, it's also very evident that properties with dubs tend to do much better than those without. For example, one of the reasons I suspect that Fate Stay Night is still so much more popular than Garden of Sinners here in the West is because, unlike Fate Stay Night, Garden of Sinners was never dubbed into English, and therefore it is far less accessible to a variety of fans. And on top of that, when you consider just how popular the dubs to video games such as Legend of Zelda or Genshin Impact have become, it seems like just a wasted opportunity for Witch on the Holy Night to have not had a dub. So now that we've covered some of my personal critiques of the visual novel, let's talk about all the good things that Witch on the Holy Night has to offer, starting with its music. Because my goodness, is Witch on the Holy Night's musical score beautiful. Hideyuki Fukusawa, who previously composed the music for Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, returns to compose the music for Witch on the Holy Night, and does an absolutely amazing job with it. Each song and musical track within the novel not only does a great job at setting the tone for each scene, but also capturing and presenting the vibe and personality of each character. I mean, I've really gotta hand it to Fukusawa, because while his score for Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works was good, he really tops himself with Witch on the Holy Night. Each of the songs not only feels distinct, but instantly iconic, and they come together to form what is probably one of the best soundtracks for a Type Moon property since Garden of Sinners. Like all of Type Moon's other visual novels, Witch on the Holy Night was written by Kanoku Nasu. However, unlike all of Type Moon's visual novels, Witch on the Holy Night was not illustrated by Takashi Takeuchi. Now, this comes as a real surprise, considering throughout Type Moon's history, Nasu and Takeuchi have pretty much been stuck together like glue, with Takeuchi having served as the artist to all of Nasu's stories since Garden of Sinners. However, for Witch on the Holy Night's case, while Takeuchi remains involved in the project as a producer, he passes the role of illustrator on to Hirokazu Koyama, which, in the end, I thought was actually a really strong move. Because while I do like Takeuchi's art, I, like many others, have been of the opinion that his art in recent years has become rather uninspired, especially after the Tsukihime remake, which featured character designs that many of us thought were a significant downgrade from the original, especially when it comes to the overall distinctiveness of the characters, as Arkwade was essentially turned into another Saberface, and Ciel now looks like Mash Kyrielite. So in this way, it's kind of refreshing to see Type Moon bring on a new artist to shake things up a little bit, and after reading Witch on the Holy Night, I think that Hirokazu Koyama was definitely the right person for the job. Because in my opinion, Koyama's art actually gives Witch on the Holy Night some of the best graphics of any Type Moon visual novel to date. And while it may sound like I'm really shitting on Takeuchi's art, I swear I'm not, because truth be told, Koyama and Takeuchi's art styles are actually quite similar. Part of the reason why I think Witch on the Holy Night's graphics work so well is because of how well the art style lends itself to the visual aesthetic of Kanoku Nasu's stories. Even though Koyama's art style is different, you can still tell that he was heavily inspired by Takeuchi in a number of different ways, such as how he draws the scenery and also the way he makes use of the lighting and shadow within the coloring of his art. But the area in which the distinction between their two art styles becomes very apparent is within the character designs. Although the designs are still heavily influenced by Takeuchi's style, Koyama still draws the characters very differently than he does, not just in terms of physical features like the nose and the jawline, but also in terms of how the characters are expressed within the designs themselves, with Koyama's style featuring a much heavier emphasis on the character's fashion and how each of the characters express themselves through the various outfits in their wardrobe. Now, unlike some of the more recent entries within the Nasuverse that feel more like lazy world-building cash grabs, fake Grand Order, Witch on the Holy Night actually feels like a project that Nasu was genuinely passionate about writing and wanting to share with his fans. As for my thoughts on Witch on the Holy Night's story, I've gotta say, I really liked it. In fact, I'm actually quite surprised by how much I like it. I really like how unique Witch on the Holy Night feels to Nasu's other work, because unlike the rest of his visual novels like Tsukihime or Fate's Day Night, Witch on the Holy Night doesn't have a super action-heavy plotline. In fact, action in general takes sort of a back seat throughout the majority of Witch on the Holy Night, as the novel is first and foremost a slice-of-life story about navigating life changes and forming unexpected friendships. And while this more drama-centric story can lead Witch on the Holy Night to feel a bit boring at times, especially given Nasu's incredibly lengthy writing style, the novel, more often than not, is still very engaging and delivers one of the most focused, character-driven stories that Nasu has ever written throughout his entire career. Another thing I liked about Witch on the Holy Night was all the subtle bits of world building and references to prior works within the Nasuverse. As a story set within the extended Nasuverse, serving primarily as a prequel to both Tsukihime and Garden of Sinners, Witch on the Holy Night does a lot to expand upon the pre-established lore introduced within the prior entries of the Nasuverse. One of the ways it does this is by diving a little deeper into the laws and customs of mage society. For example, we learn the reason why it's against the rules for civilians to witness magecraft is because magecraft itself actually becomes weaker the more outsiders know about its existence, which is why a character like Lancer was so quick to try and kill Shiro when he witnessed his fight against Rin and Archer in Fate's Day Night. Which on the Holy Night, we also learn that the Mage Association often makes deals with other mages outside of their ranks that would allow those mages to legally practice magecraft on their own, whether it be as freelancers or through the church. But by far, the best part about Witch on the Holy Night story is its cast and characters. And with that being said, let's start talking about some of the main characters within the novel, starting with Toko Aozaki, voiced by Ruiko Aoki. Many of you probably recognize Toko as one of the main characters from Garden of Sinners, and Witch on the Holy Night essentially serves as an origin story for the character, which I absolutely love. Now, some people might be taken aback by the fact that Toko is the main antagonist of this visual novel, but honestly I don't mind it. Because in Garden of Sinners, despite the fact that she was one of the main characters, we never really got to learn all that much about Toko, as she was very closed off and didn't really like to talk a whole lot about her personal life. The only mention we ever get about Toko's past in Garden of Sinners is in movie 5 when Toko faces off against her former friends from the Mage Academy. And given some of the ways in which Cornelius Alba in particular describes Toko's past self, doesn't exactly paint her in the best of light. So with this in mind, it makes sense that Toko wasn't exactly a great person in her past life, and in Witch on the Holy Night it makes even more sense given her backstory, as Toko essentially dedicated her entire life to learning magecraft and preparing herself to become the head of the Aozaki family, only for her grandfather to go behind her back and give the family crest to her younger sister Aoko while she was off studying at the Mage Academy in London. So it actually makes sense that Toko would be angry and resentful towards the members of her family, especially her sister, who essentially was given everything that was once promised to Toko without even having to earn it. And I've really gotta hand it to Konoko Nasu for going all out in his depiction of Toko as a villain, because in Witch on the Holy Night, she is super evil, committing so many heinous and unforgivable acts that it's no wonder that she never mentions her past in Garden of Sinners, because if she did, the characters in that story would probably look at her like a monster. And on that point, I really liked how many plot connections there were to the other entries of the Nasuverse regarding Toko's character. For example, in Witch on the Holy Night, we learned that the reason why Toko knew so much about Mystic Eyes in Garden of Sinners was not only because she used to have Mystic Eyes of her own, but also because she used to study them, and even goes as far as to harvest a whole bunch of them in her eyes as part of her revenge plot against Aoko. Then, in the scene where Toko first meets Sojiro, the glasses that she discards in that scene are likely the same pair of eye-killer glasses that Aoko repaired and gifted to Shikitono to help him suppress his mystic eyes of death perception in Tsukihime. Which on the Holy Night also explains why Toko was always walking around in puppet bodies in Garden of Sinners, given how badly her real body was damaged after her last fight with Aoko. And I've also really gotta hand it to Ruiko Aoki and her voice work for Toko's character, because going in, I was very skeptical of her casting, since I thought there was no way that she could possibly live up to Takako Honda's amazing performance as Toko in the Garden of Sinners film. But boy did Aoki prove me wrong, as she not only nailed Toko's vibe, but also managed to give a performance that is on par with Honda's in both pitch and delivery. Next up is Alice Kuonji, voiced by Kana Hanazawa, who you may know as the voice of Angel from Angel Beats. I really liked Alice's character in Witch on the Holy Night. I thought that her arc of self-discovery was really interesting, especially given the way Nasu decided to write her character as being very misunderstanding of her own feelings. In the novel, we learn that Alice is actually the only remaining witch within the world of magecraft, and she dedicates her entire life to preserving that part of her heritage. And while Alice doesn't quite realize it, we, the audience, come to learn over the course of the novel that she's actually very lonely because of it. Now, at first this might seem a little weird, given Alice's personality, as she's very much a hermit and not necessarily the biggest fan of people in general, but as we read the novel, we come to learn that Alice actually lost her parents at a very young age, and because of that, she's been on her own for a very long time. So in a way, being a loner is really all she knows. So while Alice may not understand it, it becomes very apparent that she does still yearn for that sense of connection, given how sentimental she is over her family's possessions, such as her father's mansion, as well as her mother's spellbook and pet robin, because it shows that she still deeply misses her parents and their companionship. Which leads into what I think is so impactful about her arc in Witch on the Holy Night, because Alice comes to learn that she doesn't have to be alone, and that it's okay to let other people into her circle, because like the majority of us, Alice discovers through her interactions with other characters that most people really aren't so bad once you get to know them, and that you might end up even enjoying their companionship if you actually attempt to get to know them well enough. And also, we need to talk about her abilities, because I cannot believe how powerful Alice is. As a witch, Alice can cast spells by chanting Mother Goose nursery rhymes, which allow her to create and summon supernatural creatures she calls kickshaw ploys, with each one possessing a different power that they can use to not only serve her as her familiars, but also enhance her natural powers, such as her mystic left eye, which allows her to not only bind her opponents, but also protect herself through a force field. Then, I've gotta give a massive shout out to Kana Hanazawa for her amazing portrayal of Alice in Witch on the Holy Night. Despite the character's rather cold exterior, I think Hanazawa does a really good job at depicting Alice's internal charm. Although Hanazawa doesn't shy away from the fact that her character is often rude and indifferent towards others, her performance still manages to show Alice's softer sides throughout various points of the novel. Like in the moments where she begins to warm up to Sojiro as both a friend and a roommate after initially being vexed by the idea of him living in her house. Or in the scene where she reveals that while she does find Aoko annoying, she does deeply respect her, and while she may never admit it, she does think of Aoko as a friend. And on that point, it's time to move on to the star of our show, Aoko Awazaki, voiced by Haruka Tomatsu. Many of you may recognize Aoko Aozaki as Shigetono's mentor in Tsukihime, and much like her sister Toko, Witch on the Holy Night also serves as an origin story to Aoko as well. One of the most interesting parts of Witch on the Holy Night is getting to learn who Aoko was as a person, because while Toko may have had a very large role in Garden of Sinners, Aoko had a very small role in Tsukihime, and we never really got to learn all that much about her outside of being the wise sage who taught Shigetono how to control his powers. And through Witch on the Holy Night, we get to learn about what Aoko was like before then, and as it turns out, she was actually quite the tsundere. As a teenager, Aoko is shown to be very hot-headed, feisty, and short-tempered, and while it's clear that she does mean well, her personality does lead her to come off as a tad bit overly aggressive. But as we dive deeper into the story, it becomes very apparent that this behavior is actually Aoko's way of venting her frustrations. The ironic part about the conflict between Aoko and her sister is that while Toko may be mad at Aoko for essentially stealing her birthright, Aoko never wanted it in the first place. Originally, Aoko wanted to spend her life as a normal girl, hanging out with friends and going to rock concerts, but thanks to her grandfather, she never got to do any of that. And for this reason, I believe that Aoko has really been struggling internally with the fact that she's had so little control over her life. And I think that's part of what makes Aoko's arc in Witch on the Holy Night so great, is because by embracing her new life, she's coming to terms with the fact that life isn't always going to go the way you want it to, and there will be circumstances that will completely turn your world upside down. And that's okay, because once you accept that, you'll find that there will be many good things that can come out of it. Now, in terms of her powers, Aoko's signature ability is Magic Bullets, which allows her to expel destructive forces of energy through the magic circuits in her arm. She can expel these bolts of energy through either a singular focused blast or through a rapid-fire barrage. Aoko also displays a lot of abilities we've seen other Magus display before within the Nasuverse, such as the Magecraft-enhanced martial arts that we've seen Rin use in Unlimited Blade Works, as well as the ability to pass energy through strands of her hair and use it as a weapon, just like Iris Veil and Ilias Veil von Einsberg. Then, of course, there are the powers she gains as the fifth magician, which, while I don't understand very well, I know involves some form of time manipulation. But if you'd like a better explanation of Aoko's powers, I highly recommend you check out Otaku Daikun's lore video on Witch on the Holy Night, in which he explains her powers in detail, far better than I ever could. But in all honesty, the thing I like most about Aoko's true magic powers is probably her form as the fifth magician, which gives her the aerial red hair we know from Tsukihime, which now glows when she uses her magic, just like Rapunzel. Then, I cannot even begin to describe just how good Haruka Tomatsu was in the role of Aoko. I'm a huge fan of Haruka Tomatsu from her role as Asuna in Sword Art Online, and after seeing how good she is in that show, it makes me so glad to see that she was able to book another strong leading role in Aoko Aozaki. Due to Aoko's rather strong personality, the character can often come off as a bit of a brat, but Haruka Tomatsu does a really good job at making sure that she's still likable even in those moments. I think Tomatsu brilliantly captures Aoko's spirit, and gives the character a bunch of charisma through her performance. But more than anything else, I am super impressed with how well she was able to depict Aoko's courage and determination, showing us that while she is very stuck up and in over her head, Aoko is still a leader and is a very loyal person who will do anything she can to protect both herself and the ones she cares about. Last but not least, it's time to talk about Witch on the Holy Night's best character, Sojiro Shizuki, voiced by Yosuke Kobayashi. Now, I did not have high expectations for Sojiro's character, given how bland the male protagonist in most of Type Moon's more recent stories have been. So you can only imagine how pleasantly surprised I was to see how well written Sojiro's character was in Witch on the Holy Night. It's easy to see that Sojiro's character is clearly a play on the good old fish out of water trope. Sojiro is someone who's been raised outside of modern society, sort of like like a mountain Tarzan in a sense, and as you'd expect, this does lead to some humorous moments, such as Sojiro trying to leave to work through the window of a multi-story school building, or him trying to make tea with a coffee pot. But what I find interesting about Sojiro's arc in Witch on the Holy Night is the way Nasu decides to explore how a fish out of water would react to supernatural phenomena, which in the case for someone like Sojiro, actually isn't all that shocking. Because as someone who's raised outside of modern society, everything from cars to indoor plumbing and air conditioning are all things that Sojiro would have never imagined actually existed within the world. So learning about magecraft is pretty much a typical Tuesday for someone like him. But what I personally feel makes Sojiro's character so special is his personality. Sojiro is very much the heart of Witch on the Holy Night. His character is so kind and considerate that you really can't help but come to like him. Although both girls are pretty mean to him at first, his warmth and compassion eventually breaks through their hard exteriors and gets them to open up in ways that they would never do with other people, which ends up bringing out the best in both of their personalities. But while the way I'm describing Sojiro might make his character out to be all cute and cuddly, in the novel he shows that he can be absolutely ruthless when he needs to. Growing up as a mountain Tarzan, Sojiro is much stronger and faster than the average person, and because of that, he's actually capable of taking down opponents much larger than himself, which he demonstrates at the end when he goes absolutely apeshit on Beowulf in one of the most badass scenes of the novel. But I don't think Sojiro's character would have worked nearly as well had they not cast the perfect actor to voice him, and Yusuke Kobayashi was an absolutely brilliant choice. Kobayashi is pretty much a superstar when it comes to anime, having provided the voice to many popular characters such as Senku from Dr. Stone and Subaru Natsuki in Re:Zero. And just like those other roles, he is absolutely fantastic as Sojiro Shizuki in Witch on the Holy Night. Kobayashi nails every aspect of Sojiro's personality, from his kindness to his naivete, and his performance has this warmth that makes Sojiro's character even more likable than he already is. Such as when he says that Beowulf smells like shit because he's a dog, or when he reminds Aoko of the promise they made at the amusement park when he tells her that if I help you, you'll let me go. Which was an absolutely incredible scene in the novel. Now, about a month before news of this visual novel's remaster got out, Ufotable and Type Moon actually announced that they were working on an anime adaptation of Witch on the Holy Night, and after reading this novel, I honestly can't wait to see it. Now, some fans are worried about the fact that the anime will be a movie instead of a TV show, since it could mean that they're gonna cut a lot of content, but honestly, I'm not one of those people. In my opinion, given how small Witch on the Holy Night story is in scope, makes it far more suited for the medium of film than any of Type Moon's other stories. And Ufotable's involvement pretty much erases any concerns I have about the story's adaptation into anime, as they've proven time and time again that they know how to adapt Type Moon's stories, with their work on Garden of Sinners, Fate Zero, Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, and Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel, all of which were absolutely incredible anime. Ufotable also has a pretty good track record when it comes to condensing stories into film, and presenting them in a way that feels cohesive and unrushed, which even applies to titles outside of Type Moon, such as Demon Slayer. And with the larger budget that Witch on the Holy Night will undoubtedly have as a movie, you can bet that Ufotable will go all out on the visuals and deliver an animation spectacle on the same level as Demon Slayer Mugen Train and Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel. In conclusion, I think Witch on the Holy Night was a great experience. Even though I feel that the novel is a bit unnecessarily long and does drag at points, those things actually didn't bother me for the majority of my read. And even in spite of those flaws, I think that it's still one of the best stories that Type Moon has put out in a very long time. And playing the novel has actually made me excited for Type Moon's upcoming work in a way that I haven't been since I first discovered them. So overall, I'd rank Witch on the Holy Night at a solid 8.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it, and I think most other people will too. So what do you think of Witch on the Holy Night? Make sure to let me know in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, hit the subscribe button, and share this video in order to help support me and my channel. And I'd also like to give a huge thank you to Otaku Daikun for letting me reference his videos. It was a huge help during the planning of this video, so make sure you check out his channel as well via the link in the description. So with that being said, I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.